In 2014, I picked up my first proper camera and started taking photos. So I've always been super interested in taking portrait photos over other styles of photography, probably due to my interest in fashion initially, but also because I found them to be an amazing way to capture more than just someone's appearance, but also their personality and overall vibe as well. A great portrait can oftentimes stir an emotional response in the viewer, and I love that. That was 10 years ago now, and in that time, I've probably taken more than 200,000 photos of people on both film and digital mediums. And while I'm still learning something new every day, in this video, I'd like to go over a few of the things that I learned that should hopefully help you out, whether you're just getting started taking portraits or if you've been doing this for a little while. Also, be sure to subscribe to see more great photography content. So to try and consolidate it, I've decided to make a list of 6 tips for getting the best portrait photos possible. So without further ado, let's begin this list. So starting out with number 6, before you ever actually go and take any photos, you should really go and research. Find inspiration from other photographers, check out photo books, browse Instagram, wherever you need to go. Finding inspiration and then subsequently planning out your shoots will lead you to have a far more streamlined process of actually taking photos. And you'll actually end up with results that will be a hell of a lot better than if you just wing it. So coming up with a mood board on Pinterest, for example, is so easy and it can really help you organize a shoot better. So when I first started taking photos, I was obsessed with looking at high-end fashion photographer shoots and wondering how on earth they managed to achieve certain looks and results. But it also helped me better understand framing and how to pose models as well. And this is honestly something that you should strive to do for your entire career. I know that when I initially first started taking photos, I definitely didn't plan my shoots out. I was kind of really like, oh yeah, we'll just wing it and figure out what happens. But the truth is that a lot of time when I was sort of, winging it and trying it out like that, the photos themselves, they were all right, but you were wasting a lot of time, trying to find locations, trying to come up with different poses and things that you could do with your model. If you plan things out beforehand and you get yourself a little mood board going and you scout your location out as well, it can make the shoot A lot faster and B, a lot more organized and streamlined. And that's kind of, especially if you're doing paid work, that can be really, really important and very, very crucial. So yeah, so learn to just do a lot of research and plan things out and before you go ahead and just start shooting. Next up, for number 5, you need to learn to understand lighting. So whether it's natural light or flash, figuring out the impact that certain lighting conditions have on your photos can really help you to nail your portrait photos. So I try to typically avoid shooting during harsh sun, but you can actually use a fill flash if you want to overcome some of the harshness imposed from the sun being directly overhead. I've actually got a video all about how to take really good flash photos that's full of all my tips on getting the best result with flash photography. Seeing as sort of during my time taking portrait photos, that kind of style of flash photography was sort of my signature, and it's something that I did quite a lot of. And in that video, I cover things a lot more in depth than I want to cover in this video, at least. In terms of using natural light, try and experiment with things like, maybe letting light in through a window, through blinds, for example, so you can get really interesting sort of patterns and results. And try to sort of think against the grain and try things differently. Obviously shooting during golden hour is the best possible results. So that's either in the morning, right before sunrise, or sort of in the afternoon right before sunset. If you're like me and you don't wake up really early, sunset's probably really the only option for me. But the truth is that, it doesn't really matter if you miss it. You don't really always have to shoot everything at golden hour. You can actually get really, really moody portraits at dusk, for example, as well. Or even at night if you use a flash. The lighting really shouldn't affect things too much if you know how to work with it and you know how to sort of bend it to what you want, basically, to use it to your advantage effectively is what I'm saying here. For number 4, so understanding composition and how to pose models can really help with giving you interesting portraits. This is again something where you can always find inspiration from others if you're having a hard time figuring out poses and stuff, but in general, you want to try and keep things simple and not overly complex for shooting portraits. So focus on your leading lines and keeping the background not too distracting. It can really help emphasize people's features. Subsequently, just to add on to that as well, I think, you don't have to shoot everything wide open either. So, if you think about a lot of new photographers, they'll get like a 50 1.8 prime or whatever and be like, I paid for 1.8, I'm using my whole aperture range. But the truth is that if you actually, stop that aperture down a little bit and you shoot at like f5.6 or f8, you can actually utilize sort of the environment and really bring that into the portrait itself. So you can really like use, like whether you want to frame a person using like a tree or a hallway or something like that, using those environmental aspects to sort of like improve your portrait photography is something that really separates the professionals from the beginners. And it's something that it can be a little bit challenging at first, but when you start to sort of look at the environment and you look at more than just the model itself, and you sort of look at, okay, how can I utilize this environment? That's why scouting locations is so important, because if you scout out locations, you don't have to go there. You can even just use Google Maps or Street View, whatever. You can use that to your advantage, and obviously couple that with the light as well, and all of that stuff you can use together to create really interesting and dynamic portraits. Also as well, like try shooting from low down, for example, if you want to emphasize making someone look more intense, or shooting from higher up, use a wide angle lens. Like there's all sorts of different things that you can try out, basically that will help get the most interesting portrait photos. And that really, at the end of the day, is sort of the thing that really will make your portrait photos stand out, is if they're interesting. Because anyone can just take a photo of a person with a blown out background and like set to f1.2 or whatever and call it a day. But just because it's technically nice doesn't necessarily mean it's the best portrait. Number 3, this is less of a technical tip and more of a social tip, but it's something that I think is really important, and it's something that I haven't seen a lot of photography YouTubers sort of really talk about. But it's the way that you communicate and interact with your model. So it can actually make a drastic difference to the overall way that your photos end up turning out. So treating the model as a person rather than as an object, and keeping the atmosphere light and chatty, will really reflect in your images. I feel like when someone feels like uncomfortable being photographed, it really shines through in the images. So it's absolutely crucial that you keep things relaxed and laid back. This is something that I've sort of done pretty much ever since I started taking photos. And I think it's always been something that one of my mentor photographers actually told me about this when I first started. And I'm surprised that it's not mentioned as much as it should be, because I think, the overall vibe and like atmosphere of an actual set can really help, A, help you get the best photos possible, and B, everything's just a lot more streamlined that way. You don't have any there's no weird vibes in the air and stuff like that. So I can understand that it can definitely be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially at the beginning. I know the very first time I ever shot with like an actual agency model, I was shitting myself, but it's really not that scary. A lot of it is just in your head. So, maybe just play some music, lighten the atmosphere, just get chatty, talk about their day. Not everything has to be like, we have to take photos immediately, get this done, this. Keep it casual, keep it comfortable, because comfortable models will 100% get you the best results from your portraits, whether you're shooting with a friend or with an agency model. Now for number 2. So number 2 is practice. Practice. You do not need an agency model to practice how to take great portrait photos. You can shoot with just a friend or a family member just fine, and I'm sure they'll appreciate getting some fresh new photos for their social media. The best way to get better at photography is to physically do it. So even if you think, oh man, I am missing a proper portrait lens, I can't take portrait photos, get that mentality out of your head, because you can take portrait photos with literally any lens you own. You do not need an ultra fast 85mm plus prime for it. In fact, you don't even need a good camera for it. You can just use your phone if you want. At the end of the day, portrait photography is just taking photos of people. It's not, I don't think that you need to put too much emphasis on the actual equipment itself. Gear does not matter as much as you think. Yeah, and that kind of just leads me on to number 1. And it's sort of the biggest thing that I learned, sort of going through this journey of taking portrait photos. And that is, honestly, you got to break the rules. That's right. The rules are made to be broken, and buddy, if you want great portrait photos, you're gonna break them. But what do I mean by this? What I mean is stuff like rule of thirds, shooting portraits at 85mm plus to achieve better compression, cranking that lens to wide open to get the most bokeh ever, even though it's completely unnecessary. The stuff that makes a photo technically perfect can oftentimes be what can make it not very interesting either. So while it's great to learn the rules when you're just getting started, experiment with different approaches to photography. You never know what kind of result you can achieve. Try different mediums out, different focal lengths, try out like an ultra wide to take portraits of people, with or without flash. get crazy with the lighting. You know, maybe try use some RGB lights, try do something like that. Just experiment and have fun, and you will naturally come up with far more dynamic, interesting, and captivating portrait photos. I think, you know, when I first started shooting, I was really like, okay, I need to use an 85mm lens because that's what everyone says to take portrait photos. And, you know, I can't use direct flash on someone because no, you need to use a diffuser and it needs to be, you know, pointed this way, and you need to have 3 different flashes to take good studio photos. All that's a load of bullshit, honestly. You don't need to listen to all those tips. Like, I think there's a lot of snobbery in the photography scene, in the portrait photography scene at least, and there's a lot of people that think that certain things have to be done a certain way, but the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, like, I've gotten phenomenal portrait photos with a $150 Ricoh GR from like 15 years ago. You know, I've taken plenty of great photos on a camera that cost me $9. Like, you don't need to worry about the things that people think is necessary. It's usually not that necessary. I think just have fun, experiment. And I mean, again, this kind of like ties in, all these tips sort of tie in together. And I think that's kind of why they sort of all sort of work together. But a lot of them are just like, just try new shit, try different things out, and you'll be surprised at how far that actually takes you. And that's it. That's my 6 top tips to nailing portrait photos. And if you're now wondering, okay, Matt, that's all great, but where do I find these models? I mean, I don't want to always shoot my friends and family. Well, the easiest way would be to either join a Facebook modeling group and ask if anyone is interested in collabing for TFP, or if you have a bit of a portfolio already, you can always DM a model on Instagram and see if they'd be interested in collaborating with you. You can always pay for a model as well if your funds allow it. Or another way that you can often find actual agency models to shoot with is if you email local modeling agencies and ask if they have any models available for a test. Usually, and if you have a little bit of a folio, they'll be happy to send some your way, and you'll be able to continue practicing and honing your skills. Remember, you will only ever get better if you keep shooting, keep learning, and don't develop too much of an ego. There is always room to learn something new. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.